It's interesting how all these things kind of seem to connect, and you don't usually think of, poetry, science, graffiti, planting gardens, but everything is kind of interlinked. My subject is race, but I'm also a poet. So I want to start off with a poem and then kind of go into my topic, because my topic is seeing past race. But I want to start off with this poem. It's called Einstein. Should I use that? Yeah. Use the mic stand? No, just hold it. I'll hold it. Right. If men studied love as religiously as generals studied the art of war, maybe life would be worth fighting for. But as is, I'm beginning to lose hope in humanity's ability to disagree without being violently disagreeable. For we have built all our altars to the gods of death, dipped our banners in blood, and said our hallelujahs to the dropping of bombs. Our prayers have become nothing more than conspiracies against those we fear. We've chained God to the dark corners of an abandoned home, and there he sits in silence with duct tape lips. We've clipped his tongue to silence his answers, crucified the prophets, praised the princes and priests who pierced the king of love. We honor peace with our tongue but cherish hatred in our hearts. That's why picket fences have become prisons for battered women, and yellow ribbons have become the nooses for youth, promised a future, but we're only so lucky to graduate to a gangster's paradise where they aim their guns in the name of the Father, the Son, and the ghost that they've become. The shattered pieces of broken dreams. The sky is red like mangled corpses. The wind carries the stench of mothers' screams that never stop, just like their tears, mingled with their sons' and daughters' blood, poured like wine as sacraments for false prophets and presidents who profit their presidents for their sacrifice. But there's no ram in the bush for these sons of Abraham, only the absolution of their dreams, and we all fall down in the crossfire of crooked smiles and smoke screens. Our bodies line the pockets of priests and politicians, paid for every soul they mislead, but our blood is on our own hands. We chose the never-ending wars and the bright, shining lies when we left our conscience on a train called progress, fighting for a myth called our way of life. If this is the way, then death comes save me. Bury my heart, it wounded me. Because life should never be taken for a cross or a crescent, a pirate's wet dream or a folded flag, a pentagon inside a pentagram or a five-star general. It seems the consensus is, get with the sickness. We say in God we trust, but our actions are senseless. As we bust, we prove we trust in bloodlust. Kill them before they grow disguised as kill them before they kill us, but neither genocide is justified, so it's dust to dust. And we all fall down in a circle that repeats like a cycle, and like Einstein. I don't know what weapons World War III will be fought with, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones. That's the piece I do. Thank you. It's a piece I do called Einstein, and it was really, I saw that quote that he had, and it made me think. And, there's a number of aspects to this race thing. It is related to science in many ways. It is related to, the eugenics movement is a big part of this. There's religion involved, and there's money involved. So this is really an issue that it deals with economics, it deals with religion, it deals with politics. What most people don't realize is, if you look at slavery in the Americas, originally slavery was not based on race. It was purely economic thing. What happened was the slaves and the peasants, because it was a very feudal type system, continued to rebel. And they were unified, just much like hundreds of years later, blacks and whites were unified in the populist movement together. But what the people who were the landlords figured out was, if we can somehow separate people, then we can be more effective. And so really and truly the reason for basing race as a measure of, slavery on race was a way to keep people divided. I mean, most whites during the time of slavery didn't own slaves. Most whites were poor too. But the point was, if we can separate black and white so they don't both see that they're being suppressed by the same people, then we can oppress them both at the same time. And that's kind of what's happened. Even if you look at, during the civil rights movement, the people who were most vehemently against, at least publicly, against civil rights are people who have been stereotyped or called rednecks, right? But poor whites are generally just as poor as blacks in the South and throughout the country. But through creating this idea of race and superiority, many whites, while they were not economically privileged, were happy enough to be, not a, black. And so because of that false sense of superiority and thinking that the government was on their side, then they didn't fight for their own rights. And I think that's why people like King and Lenin and JFK were very dangerous when you start to say people, hey, stop looking at race, let's look at other things. In fact, I would argue, and this may be controversial, and I'm a professor, and, but I don't mind saying some controversial things. I don't believe that either, I don't believe Martin Luther King was killed by one person. I do believe the government was involved. And J. Edgar Hoover had a program called COINTELPRO, which outlined his attack on black movement. So there's evidence for it. But my point is this. Martin Luther King got involved in the civil rights movement in the late 1950s. And while I think his cause the whole time was great, as long as Martin Luther King was seen strictly as a black leader, that whole time he lived. Most people don't realize when Martin Luther King got assassinated, he was about to lead the Poor People's March, where they had united whites, blacks, Latinos, and King was involved, Cesar Chavez, and they were saying, look, the real problem is not color, but the issue is economics, and that we have a system that is economically unjust. And as soon as King got involved in uniting whites and blacks, and Latinos and Asians and different people and saying, this is not a black movement, this is a movement of poor people trying to get economic justice, King is assassinated. But it's not just King, there's a pattern. If we look at Malcolm X, as long as Malcolm X was seen as a strictly black leader, he was alive. He was calling white people devils. He was condemning America. But as soon as Malcolm X comes back and says, I recognize the humanity and all, and I recognize the brotherhood and sisterhood of all people, and I recognize that blacks and whites and all different colors can work together, then he's assassinated. Same thing with Robert Kennedy. When Robert Kennedy started reaching out and having an economic movement for all people. So the point that I'm trying to make is that race as a concept is just, in many ways, I believe, a distraction. Now, scientifically, there have been justifications, like I said, with the eugenics movement, people saying that some people are superior to others, but we do know that the whole concept of race is man-made, and that, 99.98 or something like that, genetically all the same. So, the developments in skin color are due to regional differences. If you're in Europe in a colder climate with less sunlight, you don't need to develop melanin to protect your skin from the sun.
Regions. You go further up the regions, the skin color gets lighter and lighter and lighter.
You have something to say?
Yeah, and their body weight gets heavier. They have more fat. To
protect from the sunlight. So it's interesting how, you know, something so simple as a shade of skin has divided people. And being, you know, from my heritage is interesting for me because if you grow up in a black family, I mean, you're going to have someone that's as black as Wesley Snipes to, seriously, to white as white. I have two cousins who my uncle and aunt are very dark skinned, both of them. And my cousins have blue eyes, blondish brown hair, and probably skin their color. Now, technically, they're black, but I mean, they look white.